The first thing to keep into account is that the Chinese Communist Party doesn't really care about international reaction. What they care about is how the Chinese people themselves perceive what is going on. And so a complete boycott would be almost counterproductive because the average Chinese citizen wouldn't know why it was happening. But as some sort of boycott of the opening ceremonies, either by not carrying the national flags or toning it down or having world leaders not appear, that is something that Chinese citizens watching on television couldn't avoid seeing, and that might be somewhat effective.
How much power do you think the IOC has over what China does politically at this point?
The IOC at this point has almost no control over what the Chinese do. The IOC made a mistake. They should never have given the Olympics to a country that's run by a dictatorship. 125 countries are run by democracies. You didn't have to pick one of the 70 or so that has a dictatorship. And to give credit to the International Olympic Committee, when they did the vote, it was not unanimous. It was actually a very close vote that gave the Games to Beijing. So it's not like all the members of the International Olympic Committee wanted the Games in Beijing. But once they're there, there's not too much the IOC can do.
But you say that it's sort of this decision to award the Games to Beijing has rather come back to haunt them. But what good would holding out have done, do you think? Surely that would have just succeeded in isolating China further, and that would be counterproductive.
Well, I don't think so, because China is not isolated. They are a major world player in the international arena, particularly in the economy. For example, in the United States, China is the #2 trade partner of the United States. But I think it would have sent a message to the Chinese, as it did when they first tried to get the Olympics, that no, we know you love sport and we'd like to bring the Games to you, but it's not going to happen until you start respecting human rights like most of the rest of the world does.
When the IOC engaged South Korea back in 1988, the effect that it had was really the best that anybody could have hoped for, I think. Why wouldn't a similar approach perhaps work with China?
Well, there's two very different situations. What you're talking about is that when the Games were awarded to Seoul, South Korea, the 1988 Olympics, South Korea was run by a military dictatorship, and the IOC did some quiet diplomacy, as did others, saying, you better turn this country into a democracy, and they did. And South Korea has been a democracy ever since. I think this gave members of the International Olympic Committee the illusion that if it worked in South Korea, it could work in China. But it's a very different situation. South Korea had a growing economy that was still trying to make its place in the world. China is already established economically, and so they are immune to that sort of pressure. The only pressure that is effective against China is going to be economic pressure.